The most controversial and arguably the most important act by Donald Trump since he took office in January of 2017 is his repeal of DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Here's how Attorney General Jeff Sessions made the announcement.
I'm here today to announce that the program known as DACA that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
The law, dubbed the DREAM Act by the Obama administration, protects from deportation certain illegal immigrants who entered the country illegally as children and have met various criteria to stay here. Basically, they're good kids who haven't gotten in any trouble, they paid their $495 registration fee, and now they're on a list that prevents them from being deported or having their right to stay in this country revoked. Approximately 800,000 such young people were enrolled in the program as of 2017. As with all things political, most of what you've heard about the act in the last week is total, complete, and utter bullshit. There's no finer way to say it. Like, not your average everyday, I promise to work hard for the American people type of political BS, but it's like the grade A, I did not have sex with that woman, or my inauguration crowd was the biggest inauguration crowd in history, just made up, concocted from whole cloth bullshit. Today, we're going to do our best to cut through that nonsense by giving you guys just a brief overview of the DREAM Act and to tell you what is fact and what is not. I'm Jason Beckerman.
And I'm Derek Kaufman.
And this is Behind the Bar. So, Derek, in 2012, President Obama said this from the White House lawn.
Over the next few months, eligible individuals who do not present a risk to national security or public safety will be able to request temporary relief from deportation proceedings and apply for work authorization. Let's be clear, this is not amnesty. This is not immunity. This is not a path to citizenship. It's not a permanent fix. This is a temporary stopgap measure that lets us focus our resources wisely while giving a degree of relief and hope to talented, driven, patriotic young people.
Derek, tell us what President Obama was attempting to do with the DREAM Act and why it was so controversial at the time.
So the DREAM Act was really instituted to solve a big problem. So there were a lot of immigrants who came to this country illegally, and they came with young children, like you said. So Obama said, what are we supposed to do with these people? They were here for no cause of their own. They didn't try to illegally cross the border. They were just brought by their parents.
They know no other family here. Oftentimes they didn't speak Spanish because they were raised up in a fully assimilated household where they tried to speak English only. And the idea, the prospect of sending these kids back to typically Mexico, but other countries in Central and Latin America, without any sort of structure back there to take care of them because their entire family was here was a bit daunting.
That's right. They seemed like a very sympathetic group of people who treated and felt like America was their home. So sending them back to their country of origin would seem sort of draconian.
Right.
Yeah, it wouldn't feel right. So what Obama did was he instituted this policy, and this is the DACA policy, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And really it was a policy advanced by Obama to allow these illegal immigrants, because that's what they are, let's just call it what they are, I think we shouldn't mince words, who entered the U.S. as minors to receive a 2-year period of deferred action, and that's what he called it, deferred action, and eligibility for a work permit during that 2-year period. So really what he said is, look, the immigration laws on the books don't allow these people to be here. However, I'm not going to use any of our executive resources in enforcing this law. Rather, for this particular group of people who pose no national security risk, you can't have any felonies on your record, you can only have very, very minor misdemeanors. So this is a discrete group of people. You said it was about 800,000 people. And I want to put them to work. They think America is their country. Let's treat them and allow them to thrive here. So he said, no action and go get a work permit.
So the first thing I want to talk about with these comments thrown around, some of them are true and some of them are not, is the allegation that what President Obama did was unlawful because we have an entire legislatively passed immigration structure, right? People can be deported, people can be detained, people can be allowed to live here. But certain circumstances that Congress has passed legislation, the presidents over the years have signed it. Here's Obama. He doesn't run any of this by Congress because he knows he'll never get it through. He just signs an executive order and a lot of challenges saying this is unconstitutional. True or not true?
Complicated. So we'll talk about it a little bit.
Hedger, Mr. Hedge.
So you're right. Look, there's no concept known as deferred action under the Immigration and Naturalization Act. That's the big umbrella act that he's up against, and he knew that. And so what he did was said, look, as the chief executive in charge, I have some discretion on how and when I enforce laws. And this is under the Constitution. There's something called the take care clause of the Constitution, which says the president shall take care to faithfully execute the laws. But this is so open-ended, and the way it's been interpreted is there's too many laws on the books. The president couldn't possibly focus all of his attention on every law being followed to the exact T. So what he said is, we really shouldn't be using our resources to gather up this particular group of illegal immigrants and deporting them out of the country. What we should do is try to defer the action on them, kick the can down the road, and see if we can get them work permits in the meantime while Congress figures out the situation over the long term.
Right. The real difficulty that I have with the comment this is unconstitutional is that President Trump, in revoking or rescinding this presidential order, has done exactly what he said President Obama couldn't do, which is to sign an executive order of his own, or he's threatened to sign an executive order of his own, rescinding it. There have been legal challenges filed to DACA saying to the courts, you are the co-equal branch of government with the presidency. You, Congress, one of the two of you bodies can pass a law or can strike down this law in the case of the courts based on the fact that it's unconstitutional, or in the case of Congress, it's not good policy. Neither institution has seen willing to do that.
That's right.
It's because Congress is too politically charged. The courts, because it hasn't gotten there, and those court decisions that have come down have not necessarily indicated they're going to find it unconstitutional, right? So instead, the president is left with this decision that to just veto it out in the same exact sort of allegedly unconstitutional way that Obama did in the first place. And there's something sort of telling in all that. It's more political than it is legal.
Sure, and to be fair, there have been challenges to a different act called the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans. This was an offshoot of DACA, and it
wasn't enough the kids. You had to get the parents as well.
That's right. That's right. So the parents, if they came to this country illegally, but they had children in America, those children would be citizens, and there was an effort to try to protect those parents because it would break up the family, and the citizens were allowed to stay, and the parents would be deported to their country of origin. This caused a lot of rancors. A lot of Republican governors got together, Texas and 25 other Republican governors. They challenged this law in the courts, and they said, this is absolutely unconstitutional. I mean, you've now got illegal immigrants who you are just protecting in this country. They challenged that and said, this is totally in contravention to our immigration laws.
Directly contrary to what the immigration laws on the books say. Unlike DACA, this was directly contradicting the laws on the books, and that's what was different about this. But you didn't see the same type of court challenges against DACA, and that's the point. It's not President Trump can't declare something unconstitutional. That is the exclusive province of the courts. And by the way, these lawsuits that have gone against DACA are making their way through the courts. You will eventually get a ruling there, and I think it's somewhat hypocritical for him to come out and declare it unconstitutional on his own and therefore set it aside.
Right. I couldn't agree more. I think he's trying to get out ahead of this issue. There have been threats to it, but he should have let this process sort of play itself out. The courts are the right institutional body of the three major powers to figure this out.
And I don't think you and I are taking any position whatsoever on the underlying constitutionality of Obama's actions. We're just saying that, the courts are the body that is competent to make these decisions, not the next president of the United States.
Yeah, and even Jeff Sessions in his comments was saying this. He says this was a breach of the separation of powers. Well, that's something for the courts to determine, whether the separation of powers has been usurped by the president in some way. The courts make that determination, not Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He's just saying that on behalf of the executive.
And this is political nonsense all the way around. I think Obama really did, and his attempts to sort of make this law more palatable, sort of entered in some platitudes that don't necessarily apply. And it is clearly the case that illegal immigration does have a cost to American society, and Obama was sort of putting those aside, not really focusing on those, number one. And number two, there really may have been some constitutional problems with what he did. And again, he didn't focus on those, instead focusing on sort of, building up his the political base in order to get, reelected in 2012 is basically what he was attempting to do through this law. So you have those issues. Donald Trump, made some interesting comments. He said that, he has no intent of deporting these people. That's not his aim. He says, as a matter of fact, he says he loves these people. That's a quote of the president. But he relied on some constitutionality and said, I'm going to give it to Congress, and I'm going to give them a few months in order to come up with a law that can replace DACA, and that will be congressionally passed, signed by the president. Do you think that was a genuine effort by the president in order to get something better passed?
I think this seems like political cover to me. He's trying to say, I'm taking it off my plate. My hands are tied. Yeah. This is a separation of powers issue. Congress has to deal with it. But by giving them a timetable of 6 months for something that they haven't been able to solve for many many, many years. I mean, it's not as if Obama came out with DACA spur of the moment. He did it because there was an intractable problem that Congress wasn't resolving, so the executive stepped in to resolve it. He's now saying, here's a timetable. What happens at the end of 6 months? Is he going to revisit it?
Here's the genuineness of this comment by the president. He knows full well that Congress has no stomach whatsoever to pass a law to replace DACA. He knows very well that after 6 months, this is going to lapse, and the DREAM Act is going to be over. And in fact, he didn't even stay the existing law until Congress does something. He revoked it now and said, well, Congress will have 6 months in order to pass something better. We now have this sea change that's now occurred in an instant, right? And he knows very well that nothing will be passed over the next 6 months. This is going to be pushed aside. There's no effort underway to pass comprehensive immigration reform. He wants to get back to health care. He wants to pass comprehensive tax reform. We have problems with North Korea and on and on and on. You now have Hurricane Irma coming down on Florida. 6 months, there is zero chance that anything comprehensive is going to be passed, is going to save this program. It is dead on arrival at this point.
Yeah, and so one more issue with this that a lot of people have been talking about, and I was curious to hear your thoughts on it, Jason. So these undocumented immigrants were living in the shadows before DACA. They were not documented in any way. They were trying to hide from the government. There's countless stories of people who were worried every time they got in the car that they'd get pulled over and revealed as an illegal immigrant. When he passed DACA, what it did was encourage people to come out of the shadows, register, go apply for work permits, and now the rug is being pulled out from under them after they've voluntarily handed over their information, so they're all readily identifiable, and Trump could easily find them and deport them
because
at this
they've
point.
all registered with addresses and workplaces of work and the rest of it.
So it's sort of a whipsaw effect of
it is. And I read today, just before we began recording this podcast, that there are lawsuits being filed based on that very premise that this is unconstitutional because the government promised a protection and is now pulling the rug out from under the protection. Unfortunately for those people, the answer is too bad. Laws change all the time, and the fact that it's one thing. It's one thing if you pass what's called an ex post facto law. So on day one, it is let's take something. This is an absurd comparison, but let's take a law that said that you can't date anybody under the age of 18.
You always go to the age of consent, Jason.
It's the easiest one, and you knew where I was going. It's the easiest one. And the next day, it says, well, you can't date anybody under the age of 19. Those people who are dating somebody under the age of 19 at that moment it's passed must stop doing so, but you can't be punished ex post facto for what you may have done before the law was passed. Similarly, they can't punish employers for hiring people over the last 5 years who have hired them pursuant to the DREAM Act, because otherwise you could punish employers for hiring illegal immigrants. You can't do that, but you can insist that today employers stop employing these individuals. That's perfectly lawful. Similarly, you can stop people who have come out and announced themselves through filing proper paperwork that you now are subjecting yourself to deportation, and that's just the way it goes. And it's unfortunate, and don't get me wrong, I feel great sympathy for these individuals, but that is the way the law works, and there's really no legal claim that they have, as far as I'm concerned. Do you disagree?
No, I agree completely. I mean, the other point I would add is that he didn't change their status anyway. In any way, what he did was the Deferred Action Program literally just pushed the action out further. So it's not as if their status changed to legal for that period of time. They came forward with their information to sort of work within the existing structure of the immigration laws, but there was never any sort of bait and switch in this ex post facto sense where they were legal and now they're considered illegal. That's not really what is happening here. They were just deferred.
Right. They were always considered illegal. They never were given legal status. That would be something different. If you were given legal status, it'd be hard to revoke that. I don't even know if then I can see a constitutional claim.
I think that would be an issue.
Here there was never an allocation of legal status on anybody. It was simply we weren't going to enforce the laws that were out there against you if you met certain criteria. I wonder, though, could they sue for their $495 back?
That's actually interesting. Could they sue for it?
So just to clarify, so when somebody signs up for DACA and meets all the criteria, they have to pay a $495 application fee, guaranteeing 2 years of deferred action on any claim of deportation. Let's say that they've only gotten 6 months. Can they get their money back? You bet your ass they can.
I guess
that's
they could. I guess that's a good claim.
That is a good class action. I just thought of it, and you and I should run out, and we should sign these people up for a class action. This is a really good class action because you have
that's
800,000 people.
Contract,
now, some of them have gotten their full 2 years, but a lot of people. Do you have to pay the $495 every 2 years?
$495 every time you renew,
which is every 2 years.
I think that's every 2
years.
So
you probably have 500,000 or more people who have paid their $495, expecting and getting contractually 2 years workers to stay in this country. I wonder if
I think that's a great class action, provided they meet those criteria and they say, I'm still not a felon, I still pose no risk, I'm working for this employer. How can they just revoke that?
I'm beginning to think, what can
if the law itself, though, was unconstitutional
doesn't
ab
matter.
initio,
Doesn't matter.
They signed an invalid contract.
That's that's even worse. And you can sue the government for fraud,
for defrauding
for fraud in the inducement. I like this actually a lot. I think Derek and I, today's our final day at TMZ.
We'd like to submit our resignation.
We're opening up Kaufman and Beckerman LLP, and please submit your please let us know. We're going to set up a website and we'll start running television commercials late at night.
Nice.
What's that sound?
It sounds like mail time, but we have a special guest for mail time.
Well, let's call him a guest.
Maddie, don't rush over or anything. Yeah. Just sort of amble over in your own time.
I think we're going to take away the term special guest and just go with guest.
Just guest.
With someone who's not Parker.
Thanks, guys. Remember to write in your questions and comments to behindthebar@tmz.com. Real quick, I have a question on the DACA story.
A question from the man in front.
Yes.
Here he goes. Yes.
You think you can just jump in front of the line there?
I'm curious. I'm actually really curious about this. There's a story that came out that Microsoft CEO, and I believe Apple too, have come out defending their employees that they've employed through DACA, saying they have hundreds of employees through this program, and they're willing to pay all legal fees to defend their employees. I'm wondering if you guys could have an idea of how much that would cost these companies to kind of like defend them for that.
Yeah, I mean, they said that I'm just reading the story now. Apple and Microsoft pledged on Tuesday to protect workers who face the risk of deportation. They said Microsoft said it would provide aid wherever possible, including paying for affected employees' legal counsel and intervening in court cases to defend the program. I'm guessing that both companies have, of the 500,000 to 800,000, they probably have many thousands between those two companies of people who are affected by this law. What do you think, Derek? Extraordinary expense or not that big?
It depends on what they're willing to do for them. If they're willing to file affirmative lawsuits to sort of challenge the repeal of the program, that can get very expensive very quickly. I mean, then you got to get a bunch of lawyers at very high billable hour rates. I'm not sure they're willing to do that.
Yeah.
I think they'll probably continue to file the permits on their behalf, maybe defend them if there's any particular deportation action brought against one of their employees. I don't think they're going to go out and fight the law.
I have two thoughts on it. Number one, whatever amount of money it is, it's a pittance compared to what Microsoft and Apple have. I mean, what is it that Microsoft has cash on? I'm sorry, Apple has cash on hand.
Hundreds of billions.
Hundreds of billions of dollars. Literally have cash in like bank accounts earning 1% or something like that. Yeah. And so it's not a bit of money, but I do think you have a problem with spending shareholders' money on something like this. I'm not sure that this would go to the core mission of the company, although protecting your workers, it's interesting. But look, if they
you're going to invite a derivative lawsuit.
Right.
From your shareholders.
But if you want to make this a priority for the company, and if the shareholders are willing to go along with it, it's at most, what are you talking about, $50 million, and who cares? I mean, that's a rounding error.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. So as far as our actual questions in, we have a question from Jeremy. Video of Michael Bennett being detained just came out, and the police officers are seen being incredibly aggressive. Bennett has said he's looking to pursue legal action. So my question is, how far can police officers go to detain people suspected of something, and does Bennett have a case here?
Well, okay, so the video came out this morning. Michael Bennett, Seattle Seahawks linebacker, I believe, and extraordinary player, all things future.
I think he's a defensive lineman.
Defensive lineman? Future Hall of Famer in whatever respect. Video came out which shows him being pinned to the ground by police officers in Las Vegas subsequent to the Conor McGregor fight. Apparently shots, they thought shots had rung out. Everybody did. So a bunch of people scattered. Michael Bennett says that he ran like everybody else did, and he says because he happened to be a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time, was taken to the ground with force by the officer, was pinned down, had a gun pointed to his head, was threatened with being shot in the head unless he cooperated. He said he did, but nevertheless the officer jumped on his back and roughly cuffed him and all kinds of other awful things. We don't know the facts. We don't know exactly what happened. The video that we have starts with one of the officers sitting on Michael Bennett's back and cuffing him. So we don't know what happened before that. But let's say, Derek, that what Bennett says is true, that he was met with excessive force. And I pulled the definition of what excessive force is. A police officer may use no more force than is reasonably necessary to effect a lawful detention or arrest. let's say that the officer exceeded that. What do you think the claim is here?
So the type of claim that usually gets brought here is what's called a 1983 action. So if a state officer under their
having nothing to do with the year, it's the civil code
42 USC 1983.
Yeah, the federal code that governs civil rights claims. Basically, police force under the color of law against somebody because of their race, creed, sex, sexual orientation.
If you deprive someone of their constitutional rights and you're a state actor, you can use this statute, and these are what they're called in common parlance. They're called 1983 actions. So if you're ever at a coffee party, you can let your friends know about 1983 actions.
And you will no longer be invited.
You'll no longer be invited.
First of all, who goes to a coffee party?
No. Oh yeah, I guess I mixed up a coffee shop and a party.
We digress.
All right. So anyway, you bring this type of action if you're deprived of some sort of rights. So the rights he would be deprived of here are probably Fourth Amendment type rights, unreasonable searches and seizures, maybe some 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law and due process. And you bring these and you say, look, this officer is acting under color of authority, roughed me up too much, and he violated my constitutional rights in the process. You bring this type of action to sort of get damages. You can get an injunction against the police department. They might be put under a consent decree if it's really sort of an institutional problem.
We see all these things out here in Los Angeles. We had the Rampart police scandals back in the day where officers in the Rampart district were found to be planting drugs on Hispanic suspects. There are tons and tons of 1983 actions brought. Many of them, if they're found to be truthful, you'll see injunctions placed on police forces where they're not allowed to act in certain ways. If they violate that, they can be imprisoned or fined many millions of dollars.
But you've got an uphill battle.
But you have an uphill battle. Police are, for very good reason, given tremendous latitude in how they carry out their work. You're going to need some evidence that Michael Bennett was specifically targeted because of his race, and the force that was used against him was unnecessary, again, because of his race. If it's just unnecessary force, he can still sue them for battery, excessive use of force. These are state law claims, and he can still sue them for that. And I think those are a little bit easier to win, but nevertheless, you're still stuck with this uphill battle of showing that a police officer used more force than was reasonable to effect the arrest. And if a police officer thinks this person, for whatever reason, thinks this person was a suspect in a shooting that everybody thought had just gone down, you're going to be able to do basically whatever you want to him.
Yeah, even if they're ultimately incorrect. If they thought, reasonably thought at the time that they needed to detain this large man and put a knee in his back and cuff him, I think they're going to be allowed to do so.
We got Charles.
Oh, bring it in here. Fantasy football pick.
Got special guest, Charles Latibodier. You want to get on the mic?
No, not.
All right, this is ridiculous, but we are actually on. But
we're live, Charles.
My team is so far by far the best. I have.
Let's go ahead and take a couple callers from Poughkeepsie.
I don't have any. I have Antonio Brown, followed by Gronkowski, and then Aaron Rodgers. I don't yet have a running back.
The entire office is waiting on this.
So you can tell we work really hard around here. Where's the list of running backs?
Who's the top running back?
Joe Mixon, Mark Ingram.
Oh, Joe Mixon.
Oh, get Joe Mixon. He's got a mean right hook.
All right, Joe Mixon.
Joe Mixon.
Oh, I check who Charles wanted. Yeah, Matty!
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's get back to this important work you're doing here.
That'll do it for mail time, everyone.
Should we ever have Charles as a guest? No, it's fine.
We're trying to make quality programming.
We're better off without him.
Okay, so we have one comment to sign us off here. Barbara says, in the Richard Simmons case discussion, Derek used the phrase social mores a few times. The actual phrase is social mores, she says. Moray is an eel. I love Derek, and I love these discussions, but want him to know about the phrase.
We're going to let Barbara have the last word.
Well, no riding to my defense.
What do you think, Derek? So she. I don't think she thinks it's social mores. I think she thinks it's more of a French pronunciation, social more.
Yeah, I could have been more insufferable about it and said social mores if you would have liked, but lapsing into a French accent, Jason would have never let me live it down.
So, Barbara, there is nothing I like more than when Derek makes, the few times Derek makes grammatical mistakes. He's got lots of problems. Grammar isn't one of them. But I think I disagree with you on this. I mean, it is I've never heard an American pronounce it any other way except for social mores.
Yeah.
And so, technically, is it supposed to be pronounced differently with a French sort of pronunciation, or maybe we only have it in writing from Barbara, so maybe it's social mores, maybe what she thinks, or maybe she's heard it that way herself. But I've never heard it, so I think you're off the hook on this. What do you think?
I think I'm off the hook.
Yeah. Damn. But anybody else who has problems with Derek's pronunciation of anything,
come at me for a lot of things, but grammar is my forte.
He wants to point out that the word is not forte, it
Oh,
is fort.
I'm just inviting Barbara. Come at me.
All right, thanks very much, everybody. We will be back next week with another very exciting edition of, what's the show called? Behind the Bar.
Behind the bar. See you
Cheers.
then.
Thanks for watching. If you want more nerdy deep dives into the legal side of celebrity news, hit our subscribe button right here.
And check out our previous episodes over here.